Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga. And today things are going to be getting a little bit personal because it's time to talk about the impact of a series that quite literally changed my life, and one that is quite possibly my all-time favorite anime, being Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. And if you're not familiar with the series, first of all, just watch it, immediately. It's absolute gold except for one random episode where the animators were high, but even that's forgivable in the grand scheme of things. But I'd also like to say right at the outset that there will be spoilers in this video, and if you haven't seen Gurren Lagann, I highly recommend that you go in blind. To start off with, the basic premise of the series follows two teenagers, being Simone, or Shimon in Japanese, but apparently it's Simone in English. But in any case, he is a timid boy who prefers to keep himself out of trouble. And then there's Kamina, a brash fool who is seemingly Simone's polar opposite. And the series follows their journey to escape from their underground village and explore the surface world, the sky, outer space, and even beyond, involving heavily stylized battles in mechs of, questionable logic. Simple enough, I suppose, kind of. But this property went absolutely insane and unleashed an unstoppable wave of potential into the world, thanks primarily to the partnership of Hiroyuki Imaishi and Kazuki Nakashima, who would go on to work on a couple of other projects together, which I also loved, with the prime example of which being Kill la Kill. But what these two brought to this story, amongst many other things, was an overwhelming sense of optimism and empowerment, a feature which I think is echoed quite strongly in their other collaborations, but this was the first time that I'd really had such a taste of this potent optimism, and I have to say that all of it's epitomized in one of Kamina's classic quotes, which I still use today, which is "Believe in the me that believes in you." And Kamina essentially used this to artificially boost Simone's confidence because he knew that Simone looked up to him, and it's such a brilliant phrase because nobody ever knows how to react to it. Whenever I've used it in real life, I've often gotten quite shocked reactions, and non-anime fans often praise me for my out-of-the-box thinking, which in reality is simply a basic philosophy that I stole from an animated man with incredibly blue hair. But why is all of this optimism talk relevant? Well, it's because I was watching Gurren Lagann when it was first airing, which was while I was in my final year of high school, being 2007. And yes, that does make me old. Thank you for noticing. But the person I was back then is radically different to who I am now. I was an extremely introverted, antisocial, generally depressed kid with a deep distaste for the world in general and no confidence in myself whatsoever. And what's worse is that while I was watching and reading a whole ton of other series at the time, because, that was the only enjoyment I could find in life, living vicariously through fictional characters, but most of those stories happen to be really deep and depressing properties. Think stuff like Evangelion, Trigun, or even Fate Stay Night. Generally darker, more profound themes that come at great expense to a character, often resulting in tragedy. And yeah, I was also engaged in more optimistic series, I was reading One Piece weekly at the time, and honestly that was a bit of a lifeline of joy for me and still is. However, in 2007, everything changed for the better. Being the hardcore high school weeb I was, I made it my mission to watch anything and everything I could, and April brought us Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, and I was hooked from the very first episode. The art was incredibly stylized in this super schmick manner that really stood out from the more quote-unquote, realistic stuff I'd been watching, with a great quirky sense of humor and some pretty stunning animation for its time. In fact, one sequence I don't think I'll ever forget is during episode 1, when Kamina and Simone collided two sets of mole pigs, and in an event that I can only describe as somehow, created a vertical pig tower to attempt to take them to the surface. Makes no sense whatsoever, but that was really the beauty of it. It didn't have to make sense because it conveyed the emotional intent very, very effectively, perhaps even in a superior manner to realism, and this was an eye-opener to me because even to this day I despise dipping too much into realism in my own creative work, which is mostly theater design. I very much prefer conveying a powerful idea through something more hyper-realistic, basically making emotion and atmosphere palpable through design, and that is exactly what Gurren Lagann does so damn well throughout its run. But of course, the key selling feature to me was Kamina, because he was this supremely confident, never give up and shoot for the stars personality kind of guy, and that was everything I wanted to be, and very much still want to be if I'm honest with you. The reality of the situation back then though, was that I was the young Simone, and that's why I quite disliked Simone in the beginning, because if there was one thing I didn't want to see in a series meant to help me escape from the world, it was me. But at the same time, this connection to Simone would be what triggered the change in my life, because going forward, Kamina was able to constantly show Simone that anything was possible and push him far past his limits, taking him to the surface world and leading a resistance against the beastmen who oppressed humanity. And it got to the point where every victory for Simone felt like a victory for me personally. And that whole believe in the me who believes in you philosophy really got burnt into my soul, and even though I didn't have a real life figure like Kamina saying it to me, I still took on board the general idea, which is that your own self-doubt is irrelevant. Just do the thing. Do the thing the best you can, and if you fail, then so what? But if you never try, you'll never succeed, and it is amazing just how the world unlocked when I started looking at things this way. I took opportunities I never would have considered before, and I even learned to create my own opportunities, which is something that has led to pretty much every major career decision in my adult life. And once again, all thanks to the words of a 2D character. A 2D character that I should say would go on to leave me in shock after episode 8, when seemingly out of nowhere, Kamina sacrificed himself and made a grand exit from the series. Now, to a high school me, this was incredibly shocking because I simply wasn't used to stories that allowed their main characters to, well, be mortal. Remember, this was a time before Game of Thrones popularized the nobody is safe style of storytelling we see a lot today, and lots of my experience in anime was stuff like Dragon Ball, where death was effectively meaningless, and when it came to the darker series, well, the main character would always die at the end if that was going to happen, definitely not episode 8. And this event left me really conflicted because on the one hand, I was used to tragic, depressing events, as stated before, but it was kind of different. This wasn't just tragic, it was actually pure heroics. There was something really bittersweet about leaving Kamina behind because I knew that he himself was incredibly satisfied with how he had used his life, and also this method of sacrifice would not be restricted to Kamina alone, because towards the end of the series, several key characters, all of whom I loved, went on to embrace doing the impossible and channeling their lives towards the constant evolution of humanity. And each and every one of them was another eye-opener of how even in its most tragic moments, life doesn't need to be overcome with despair, because there is almost always a path forward. But on the other hand, this initial sacrifice had left me with Simone, the guy I still didn't really like because he was too much like me. But this is where things really kicked into gear, because it was now time for Simone to step up and prove to every introverted, self-doubting human being on this planet that they too could do something amazing, or barring doing something amazing, something somewhat decent. They could do something, and even that is enough. And yes, I know it's just an anime, but that's the effect watching Simone grow had on me. He went through a bit of a Shinji phase, but a handful of episodes later, that was done. Simone took on board everything that Kamina had spouted at him, and he made the active choice to live the believe in the me who believes in you lifestyle, just from a different perspective, as he went on to inspire, I guess, pretty much the entire human race, leading to the defeat of the Beastmen and the end of human oppression. And yes, it's all fictional, but that doesn't make it any less inspiring to see somebody that I identify with become someone that I could only dream of being. And it's obviously not just Simone either. I've spent a lot of time talking about both he and Kamina, but the extended cast of Gurren Lagann is one of the finest pool of characters you will ever find in storytelling, and they all grow to this point of insane optimism, overcoming their own personal barriers and reaching incredible heights as a result. In fact, even the established antagonists undergo this transformation like Viral and Lord Genome, and when they all come together at the end, well, that's one of the most satisfying conclusions to a story that I have ever experienced. Speaking of though, you know what? Most series narratively could and maybe would have stopped at the point of defeating the Beastmen, but that is the halfway point of Gurren Lagann, and it had only just begun to showcase its glory as Simone continued on his path, facing incredible hardships, but pushing through each and every one of them and forging a path not only just for humanity, but I guess sort of life in general, which in the case of this series would be the spiral life forms, as he went on to replicate his success with the Beastmen and lead the charge against the oppressors of the universe, the anti-spirals. And the maddening way in which Gurren Lagann just kept one-upping itself constantly won me over, as it rapidly morphed from a small grounded adventure between two teenagers to an intergalactic space opera, and somehow it worked, which I guess was through a combination of its aesthetic qualities, quirky storytelling, and the sheer drive of the series to push boundaries, much akin to the characters themselves. To this day, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like Gurren Lagann, which takes on such an epic journey but never loses sight of its core ideas. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched the last episode of the series, specifically the first half with the battle against the anti-spirals. It's almost certainly over 100 times at least, I can tell you that much, and it never fails to captivate me. It's one of those things that I watch whenever I'm feeling a bit down or need some inspiration, or if I'm just feeling neutral in general. To me, it's an injection of life in whatever situation calls for it. A reminder that I do have the drive to do things, and even if I'm feeling less than confident about achieving them, well, I should do them anyway. That is the insane impact that Gurren Lagann has had on my life just by absorbing its core philosophy. It's that sort of artificial confidence and realization that just because you're uncertain or even afraid of something doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't do it. And to sum up some major decisions I made in regards to to that? Well, it ranges from stuff like deciding to leave home and going to study theater for 3 years straight out of high school, to the more mundane stuff like having the courage to ask someone out who I traditionally would have been far too self-conscious to approach. But I have to say that the most profound effect it's had on me is in every aspect of my creative life. I mean, I became a theater designer because I thought, screw it, why not give it a go? And in more modern times, I became a YouTuber because I thought, that seems fun, let's challenge myself and see if I can break into that space. And no, it doesn't always work out. There are plenty of things I've applied this to that have failed. Some of them failed spectacularly even, but I definitely don't regret trying because I believe I've lived a significantly more rewarding life than I would have if I hadn't gotten that boost of optimism that Gurren Lagann hooked straight into my veins at the age of 17. Now, with all of this said, is Gurren Lagann objectively the best anime series of all time? There's no real way to measure that, but probably not. In fact, Gurren Lagann, despite what I said in the intro of this video, isn't even my favorite series of all time. One Piece is. And just to clarify, I'm talking about the manga much more so than the anime, because the anime, it's got problems, but you know it doesn't have problems? Gurren Lagann. Beautiful anime. And look, Gurren Lagann hit me at a very vulnerable time, and I have no doubt that it was an incredible influence on molding who I am today. And you know, I have met a lot of people who have seen the series and they think it's kind of meh. And that's fine though, because those people each have their own life-shaping pieces of media that they look to. And if you have a series as close to you as Gurren Lagann is to me, then please do drop it in the comments, because I'd love to know what pieces of media or even just plain entertainment inspire you in some way. And for all of you out there who have something you want to do but are just too timid to begin, well, just believe in the me who believes in you. Because if I can do it, then I guarantee you that literally anybody can. But that pretty much does it for how Gurren Lagann quite literally changed my life. If you enjoyed this video and the content this channel produces in general, then please do consider donating to the New World Review Patreon, because the support of all of you amazing people is what continues to make this channel possible. And if Patreon isn't quite your style, then please do leave this video a like, share, or subscribe, because it also helps support this channel an incredible amount. And if you'd like to join the fun at any time, then please do head over to my Discord server, where a wide array of shenaniganry takes place on a daily basis. And finally, please do comment with your thoughts on Gurren Lagann. This has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.